All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Today, we're sitting down with the legendary Matthew Distefano to talk about his book, Don't Be a Dick, along with some other hot topics as well. Who knows where the conversation will go? So, Matthew, welcome to the coolest place in town, next to the Heretic Happy Hour, of course. It's great to finally have you on the show.
Well, that goes. Thanks for having me. First of all, that just goes without saying. I mean, everything. If you say it's the greatest place to be, it's obviously with the fact in mind that that's second only to the Heretic Happy Hour. I'm kidding, of course. Glenn, thank you for having me.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. We've been wanting to do this for a while. I feel like I hit you up a while ago, and then it like never happened. Like other things happened, and I don't know. But thank you for reaching back out and saying, "Hey, let's make this happen."
Yeah. Thanks.
Def-
Thanks for having me on this lovely Tuesday afternoon where you're at, morning where I'm at.
For sure. So first things first, since you're first time on the show, tell us a little bit about you. Who are you when you're not writing books, about not being a dick and other things? What do you do? Give us the kind of the snapshot of Matt.
Well, I mean, so I'm married. I've been married for 17 years. I have a daughter who is going to be 12 this year. I have been doing social work jobs for off and on for like 17 years. I worked in juvenile hall, I've worked in group homes, and now I do service coordination for elderly and disabled folks. Um, what else do I do? I
How does that
really,
work? How is that work? Is that rewarding work? Is it?
well, it is and it isn't. I mean, it's like, I always like, when I talk to young social workers and they have aspirations and dreams to like save the world,
Yeah,
it's like, I mean, at this point, I'm not cynical, but at the same time, like it is. I'll say this: the stock company line is, "We don't pay you that well because it's really rewarding work, and we hope that that's why you do it." And it's like, yeah, that gets old after a while when you're in California and things are really expensive,
right.
and
Sounds
you're
like the
making.
church.
Yeah, it was it was very much that I was when I was told that by one company, I was like, oh, I feel like I'm back in church again.
Right.
But it isn't. It is and it isn't. Like anything, it's a job.
Mhm.
But there are moments where you are rewarded. In terms of like, when you think about how you've helped other people who wouldn't
Yeah,
otherwise have help. It's nice. It's just, it's like anything. Like I said, it turns into a job, and once you do it long enough, it's like it's not necessarily my passion, but I do like it.
gotcha.
Um, and in addition to work and everything, I love gardening. I'm a Tolkien nerd. I like hiking and biking, and I like European football.
Awesome. And how many books have you written now? I think I
I
like
don't.
lost track.
I really don't. I have two. I don't know. I think it's like eight or nine,
Eight
something
or
like that. And
nine.
I've been involved in other projects and contributed for other books. So
You have another one in the works?
I have many in the works.
Many in the
Yeah,
works, not just one.
yeah. One I'm really excited about is called The Wisdom of Hobbits. So it's a book on Tolkien and hobbits. And I know, if I remember correctly, you have not read Tolkien. So shame. I bestow shame upon you.
Sorry.
Yeah, well, don't apologize to me. To apologize to the professor. Um, no, but so I'm excited about that book.
Mhm,
It's funny because I've written a bunch of theology books,
mhm.
and I, of course, tried to make them um, you know, stand up to scrutiny and a level of scholarship and all that. And I write popular books, so I'm not writing academia because I don't have any interest in that field, but
Sure.
or in that world. But I'm actually more nervous about getting Tolkien right and getting my interpretation of him correctly
Really?
in this book than I have been in any other theological book. Yeah.
Really? So you're afraid like of the if you get something wrong, will there be like heat from the fan club?
Um, I don't. I mean, it's not. I mean, like with anything, there's toxicity within any fan bases.
Yeah.
But I respect that world so much and the world that he
Gotcha.
created so
Mhm.
much that I don't want to fuck it up. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I would I would rather have this. I would rather face the wrath of God than the scorn of Tolkien. You could put that on a meme.
That should go on a t-shirt or something for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and but I think any Tolkien like aficionado would probably be like, yeah, I get where he's coming from. It's not that Tolkien was like rude or anything, but just like just have that much level of respect for him. So
Gotcha.
I want to get this book right.
Gotcha. So as somebody who has like no experience with this world other than I've seen the movies,
Right.
I
Yeah.
think the movies, I feel like the movies were so long. I feel like I got
Yeah.
lost in the
Yeah.
movies, and I feel like I got all the worlds like just very confused, all the names, things like that. So I think I just lost interest. If I were to pick up
Yeah.
the books, is there like a place to begin? Because I know there's like the pre stuff, like the Hobbit stuff. I know there's the main storyline. Like, is there a certain place to begin, or do you just jump in?
Hmm. And everyone's gonna have their own opinion on that.
Like Star Wars.
Um, right. Yeah. I mean, The Hobbit's the easiest to read. It's more along the lines of I say it tentatively, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's more of a a children's ish book than The
Okay.
Lord of the Rings would be.
Hmm.
The Lord of the Rings is going to be more like traditional high fantasy, and it's going to have a lot of that backstory and a lot of things like that. And then, so the Hobbit would be a good place to start. It's easier read and it's shorter and quicker.
Hmm.
And the writing style is the prose is different. But I mean, in the Lord of the Rings, if you could read like 4 pages and all Tolkien has done is described like the mountain off to the left. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
So it could be a bit of a slow burner, but that's I mean that's why I like it, but that's what is can be a put off for some people. So I guess I would start with The Hobbit.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I will make note of that, and we'll see if I do it. I will let you know. You'll be the first one I let know.
Well, I appreciate that, Glenn.
Absolutely. So I'm really interested, and you might have a lot to say, or you might have a little bit to say. I don't know, but I'm interested, and a few of our listeners have actually asked me too because they knew you were coming on the show. But maybe hearing a little bit about your spiritual journey. So maybe before we talk about
Yeah.
the book, we could start there because most of our listeners are the ex-evangelicals. They grew up in the evangelical world, some more fundamentalist than others. But I'm kind of
Yeah.
curious, like what was your upbringing like regarding God and faith and the church and the Bible, and then what led you to that, I guess, your personal evolution where you've kind of become one of those voices that the ex-evangelical people look to the point where I saw that you were included on one of those memes going around with faces
Yeah.
on it of the wolves in
I
sheep clothing.
I was a footnote. I was an amendment. So that was
Yes, I think you
nice.
and I are on the same one. I think somebody
Are
added
we? Oh,
both of
good.
us. Yeah, I'm off to the
Well,
left of you.
oh, right. I mean, I generally don't pay attention to that kind of stuff. People, it's fun to see it go around. You know, I've seen like the church signs that my buddy Adam Erickson does.
Yes,
I've seen those go viral, and mine is
the atheist one has gotten some traction. It's like
yeah,
everywhere.
it's been shared. Yeah, so those are things are kind of fun, but
Yeah.
um yeah, so I'm glad we're on the same team there. Yeah, so I have a I'm not trying to like shamelessly plug this, but
Mhm.
I do have a book with Michelle Collins called Learning to Float coming out July 5th.
Okay.
Where it is my it's my story, but it's done through a kind of sitting down and talking with a friend who happens to be she's getting her psychology doctorate.
Okay.
So it's got that sort of like talking to your therapist vibe in a way,
Hmm.
but it's really just two friends chatting, and we kind of go through my whole story. I mean, I was raised like in a typical evangelical context. You know, Protestant. We
Hmm.
believed in the rapture. We believed in hell. We believed in the inerrancy of Scripture. We believed in that, you know, LGBTQ was, you know, not ideal.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
It's putting it mildly.
Did I say it euphemistically? It's not ideal here. And but I always had like these like burning questions from the time I was little.
Mhm.
Like, and I had a lot of nightmares and a lot of trauma that was associated with my doctrines. You know, my grandfather, my grandfather and my grandmother, you know, as most Mediterranean people are, him being Portuguese, my grandmother being Sicilian, like you're de facto Catholic, right?
Mhm.
Even if you're not practicing. So he was pretty agnostic, and I was always terrified that he was going to hell.
Mhm.
And then I was terrified that I was going to hell as well. So there was a lot of trauma that it was kind of like undergirding my faith.
Mhm.
And I feel like looking back, all of my involvement with the church, whether I was because I played multiple instruments, so I was leading worship and Bible studies and going on retreats and all that kind of stuff. I feel like it was like trying really, really hard to earn my salvation. And they would not say it like that, right? Salvation is by grace alone, blah,
Mhm.
blah, blah. But I mean, the reality of it was that I was trying really hard to prove that I was right with God.
Yeah.
And then it just didn't work any longer. So in my 20s and my late teens and my early 20s, I started to have and ask deeply existential questions to my pastors, and they were really dismissive,
Hmm.
which was unfortunate because I was close with them. Like, I was good friends with like the pastor's kids, and I knew these people for years and years and years. And then it dawned on me, like, the relationships that were formed in the church, the basis of them were not relational, they were doctrinal.
Yeah.
So I mean, everyone listening is probably like, yeah, I felt that too, like, or I've experienced that too. But it's so true. It's like one after another, one person after another realizes that as they start to ask questions. And we use the analogy in the book of like, or it's like in Kafka's Metamorphosis, when the main character turns into a beetle, his family pretends eventually that he just doesn't exist, right?
Yeah.
And it's sort of that, as you transform into this grotesque thing, and that's what they see you as, right?
Hmm.
um Either an atheist or an agnostic or a backslidden Christian or a heretic or a heathen or an
Yeah.
apostate, whatever the word is.
Whatever label is going to be label of the
What
day.
exactly, the label du jour, the wolf in sheep's clothing. That's a good one,
Yeah.
classic. You become kind of this monster that no one
That's right.
wants to acknowledge. And so I've always been vocal. I've always been in that way, like, I'm going to express myself. You kind of know where I stand. And so that just continued on as I left the church, as I discovered uh other people who were asking these questions, but other scholars who were also giving a lot better answers than my pastors were about,
Hmm.
you know why is there so much suffering in the world if God is so good? How does all the the deeply existential
Yeah.
questions we ask? It was like, oh wow, there's a whole theological world out there that my church never told me about.
Yeah.
So God doesn't necessarily have to be some tyrant in the sky.
Hmm.
Lo and behold, there's a lot of healthy theology out there. And that's when it was, down the rabbit hole. And as they say, the rest is history.
Yeah, I think that piece that you said about like things become more doctrinal than they do relational is something I so many people can relate to, and I know myself for sure, because I feel like, and I've said this before, that like when I started like deconstructing and asking questions and started this podcast, it was like so many people that I thought were deep relationships with. Like I had people that I knew for 15, 20, 25 years go in my DMs and say some of the most horrible things to me. And I'm like, I said to my wife, like, did these people love me or did they just love what I believed and what I used to teach from the
Hmm.
pulpit? Because I feel like I'm the same person. Like I still have the same blood pumping through my body, the same heart, the same everything. But my mind has changed about some things. But now all of a sudden, these people who I've sat around tables and cried with about life and about things, like all of a sudden it's like I'm this person who's cast out and I'm thrown away. And it just feels
Hmm.
like crap.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard not to be cynical at that point. Did they love me, or did they love the fact that I played guitar and
Right.
drums, and I could set up, I could be there on Sunday, I could be there Sunday afternoon, I could be there Sunday evening, I could be there Wednesday.
Yeah.
um it's like the line from The Office. Do you love her, do you love the idea of her? So
Right. Right.
it's like, you start to realize, I don't think they loved me or cared about me. I think it was, I mean, the cynic in me, it's like numbers for the coffers, and
Yeah.
filling, so, and least cynical, at least it's more like, yeah, we want people there who can like validate what we believe, and the
Yeah.
more that are there that validates that, the better validation they have.
Yeah. That's right. Now you have a daughter, right?
Right.
You said how old is she? Did you say? I think you said that
She's
earlier.
11.
She's 11. So just out of curiosity, if you don't mind going down this road, like what do faith conversations look like with her? And I'm thinking about that because my daughter is 5, and so I've got a little ways to go before she's
Right.
her age. But she's starting kindergarten in the fall, and like my mind is reeling with like what our conversations going to look like with her, especially as she begins being with other kids, other families. We live in the South, but like
Yeah.
I don't want her to know, I want her to know what I believe or what I think I believe. It feels like it changes on the daily sometimes, but I also don't want her to feel like I don't want her to feel like she has to like believe what I believe. But at the same time, I want her to know this is what daddy believes, mommy believes, but there's other ways to believe as well. So I'm just curious, like what have those
Yeah.
conversations look like with your daughter in your home?
There's been less conversation about like those sort of things
Hmm.
than than probably, most people would be comfortable with.
Okay.
I mean, she asks some really good questions. So she's a lot like me in terms
Yeah.
of like her prying and um, like if my wife and daughter, if they bicker, like and I'm scoring from the sidelines sometimes in my head, I'm like, oh man, like my daughter's like kind of getting the once over on her. So she's very philosophical and all
Okay.
those sort of things. But we don't really we don't really talk about like the theologies or the beliefs as much as we do about like how to be like a good human being and
Mhm.
what to stand for in practical ways. And so she's like she is like a women's rights activist in her own school,
Okay.
like this last at the end of the year party, because she's going to junior high
Mhm.
next year, which is crazy to me. But so they have this like trip to the lake, and
Mhm.
right, boys are allowed to not have their shirts on because they're going to be at the lake, but girls have to wear a one piece.
Mhm.
So my daughter goes to the school and explains to them why this is unfair and why there's a double standard between boys. So she's that at 11. I'm like,
She's a mini
okay,
Matt.
right. I'm like, okay, this is gonna be a problem at some point, but awesome at the same time. Like,
Right.
so we're probably gonna have calls from places that are like, hey, your daughter's. I mean, she's doing the right thing, correct? Right.
Right.
But it's like she's challenging the status quo in the system, and
Yeah.
and and that was like a proud parenting moment of like she gets it
Mhm.
in terms of how to be a human, and for us it's been like a lot of not talking to her about beliefs, but just like putting into action what's important. Like she is 100% an LGBTQ activist, and she
Mhm.
doesn't fuck with anyone who isn't that. Like she's
Yeah.
like her foot down. You either it's acceptance or bust. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that about her. So I'm sure that the discussions about, I mean, we've had discussions about God,
Sure.
and it's a lot of like, I don't know, but the closest thing I can think of is I experienced God when I experienced love and
Yeah.
compassion for other people.
Yeah.
And that seems to have satisfied. And to me, it's like my goal, and I heard Rob Bell say this years ago, my goal is to have her undo as little as possible when she becomes an adult. And I feel like most of my problems and my wife's problems in terms of like theology and beliefs and trauma that stems from it is all this shit that we've had to undo.
Yep.
So it's like, okay, I might not be able to give her all the answers, but as long as she doesn't have to undo all of them,
Yep.
then I think we've had a successful go at things.
Yeah, that's what I feel too. Like, I was talking to my wife the other night. I was saying, like, I feel like we've picked up so much trauma in our lives from the church and theology. And I
Yeah.
can remember like crying myself to sleep as a kid because I was afraid like either I was going to go to hell or everybody that I love was going to go to hell. And should I be
Right.
evangelizing my parents? Like all these different kind of things, And I'm like, at least I'm sure we're going to do a lot of things wrong, but at least like that's one thing she's not going to have to deal with is trying to
Right.
untangle this stuff that we've preached to her and like tried to make her believe. So I feel like at least we're on some kind of right track.
Yeah. Yeah. Just yeah, like you said, we're not going to get it perfect. We're not going to get it right 100% of
Yep.
the time.
Yeah.
But I think, in doing that, I think that's a blessing too,
Sure.
because, a lot of traditional quote unquote old school parenting is like you're always right.
Yeah.
But I love the new model, or at least a new model of like, yo, I messed that one up. I'm sorry. And that's like super powerful for a kid. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're correct. I totally messed that one up.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, that's the end of that power struggle. So we're good.
Yeah.
Move on and learn from
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah. And you can do that when they're young too. Cause the other
Totally.
day, my daughter did something and I was just having a day and I just lost my patience and I was just not very patient with her at all. And later on, I went to her and um, I said, Daddy, I'm sorry. I said, Daddy was not patient before. I have a lot of things on my mind today. And I'm sorry. She goes, that's okay, Daddy. I forgive you. But I think just going to there and just, admitting that you were wrong in something also gives
Mhm.
her the freedom to admit that too down the road when she makes mistakes. So
Oh yeah, as mimetic creatures, yeah, totally, 100%.
yeah, yeah. All right. So your book, Don't Be a Dick, Other Sound Advice. You give 69 practical ways to be a better human. And
Yeah.
I laughed on every page, to be honest with you.
Oh, good.
Because
That's the goal.
I was sitting there with my daughter on the couch and I was reading it and I was laughing. She's like, "Why are you laughing at that book, Daddy?" It was funny. Really made me think about a lot of stuff. So for our listeners, there's 4 sections, right? There's don't be a dick to your family, coworkers, community, and the last one is, what's the last one? Online.
Online, probably the most important one
Yes,
in these days.
exactly. So first of all, why this book? Like, why write a book about not being a dick? Is this like all the people you've encountered that made you want to write this book, or what was the main reason?
Well, no, I mean, I say in the introduction, like this book is it's for myself. Like I mean, there's times when I'm a dick, and we always had a joke in our we signed off our show, the Bonfire Sessions, which is now a retired podcast. But we say, just don't be a dick. This is our advice. Like, so I was like, well, why don't I just write a book called that? And like, I mean, it kind of stems from this. Like, I deconstructed hell. I deconstructed the Bible, all these things, right?
Yeah.
And I'm no longer afraid of God. I don't plan on dying tomorrow, but I'm not afraid to die. But okay, so now what? If the evangelical message is nothing I'm interested in, then what now though?
Yeah.
It's fun to talk theology but it's all kind of ivory towerish at times, unless we're doing practical things. So it's like, but at the same time, like, let's balance the fact that I can't fix the climate crisis. So, but what can I do in my community, in my little small corner of the world on a day-to-day basis to make myself happier, my family happier, my coworkers happier, and just everyone a better place, right? For everyone that lives there. So that's just practical. I mean, just practical things and try to write it. I try to write it comedically. And so I'm really happy. That's the best thing I've ever heard, is that you laughed, because it was supposed to be funny and self-deprecating and but also get you to think and be like, okay, if I just implement a couple of those things in my day to day and it becomes routine and ritualistic, then great. If I'm more conscious about, my shopping cart, it's just mundane things. Like if I'm more conscious about, making my coworkers have a better experience in the office, or making my community cleaner and less full of clutter, great.
Yeah.
That's the motivation behind it.
Yeah. And I mean, in the book, I mean, it's like you said, it's obvious things. I mean, but it's things you might not always think of, like you said about putting the shopping cart back, because after I read the book, I don't always notice those kind of things, but like after I read that part of the book, I went to the grocery store a couple of days ago and I saw people just leaving their carts. I'm like, these jerks leaving their, you can't just put the cart back in the thing.
There's a great, I think it's a YouTube channel where the guy just finds people who aren't putting their shopping cart backs, and then like puts like magnets on their car, a big flag that says like, I'm a jerk, I don't return my shopping cart, and they get it's like, well, that's you're looking to get punched in the face. But I took a different approach. But I think the point being, like, I mean, well, and you think it's simple, and you think it's just stupid to like make a big deal about it, but I work with people who have cerebral palsy, who can't walk around as well as able-bodied people can.
Yeah.
So if I'm taking him to the grocery store and there's a shopping cart in the stall that's close to the store, either I have to get out or I have to find a spot further away.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I'm trying to find a close spot for him so that he doesn't have to walk too far.
Yeah.
But by just you doing that stupid little thing and not putting your cart back, now you've inconvenienced this person who may trip because they're too tired or whatever.
Yeah.
Or you may come across someone who, you mentioned the other day you were not having a great day. You don't know where someone's at. So one little thing like that might just set them off to where they're having a horrible, horrible day.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be responsible for that. So it's like, I'm going to do my part to like not be in people's way, not, I'll challenge the system and the status quo and everything like that. But it's like the day to day, I don't want to be the person in line, who has like 8 people behind him because I'm doing whatever, just, that's kind of what the motivation is there.
Yeah. The one that got me, the one that had me laughing was one about the workplace. And you're talking about the break room, about like lunch and stuff in the break room. I was thinking back when I worked at Apple, there was this guy, it was like maybe, I don't know, 8 years ago. He'd always bring fish in and he would like put it in the microwave to warm it up. You never put fish in the microwave. And at Apple, like we obviously can't open windows because the break room is like cement walls, because it's all the computers are back there, everything else. So it's all high security, everything else. So it would just stink for days. after you'd
Yeah.
stick fish and broccoli in there. It's like just not a very thoughtful thing to do.
Yeah, the
So
funny, I
up,
mean, yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah.
Sorry. No, go
No,
ahead.
no, I'm just in the book. The funny thing is that they did the same thing with fish and broccoli, but people did it at a play,
Right.
and they were opening up Tupperware full of fish and broccoli at a play. Like I was like,
Right.
what the at a small little theater house, right?
Who
Like,
does
what
that?
the fuck are you doing?
That's like going to the movie theater and popping open some fish. It's
Yeah,
disgusting.
yeah. I made some salmon from yesterday. What? Stop
Right.
it.
So of these 69 practical ways, which one, two, three, whatever, have you wrestled with the most in your own life, your own journey? Like which one of these is like when you were writing, it was like, oh yeah, this is something that I've really I've
Um,
had to handle in my life, or maybe I've got to get a handle on, whatever.
yeah, that's a good question. So one of them is using the laugh emoji mockingly on Facebook. I realized how much of a dick move that is, and I used to do
Yeah.
it. Like if someone says something stupid, and you can laugh. I mean, by all means, laugh behind your computer screen, but just
Hmm.
don't like mockingly do that. I
Yeah.
I, I think it's so aggravating, and I'm sure the person on the other end is quite aggravated too. And you're not
Yeah.
like, what's the point at that point? Because you're not communicating at that point. You're just laughing in someone's face.
Yeah.
So that is definitely one that I put in the book that I have not done since,
Hmm.
and won't do. And so I've made a point not to do that. Another one is some of the parenting things. Using lines like "because I said," that's a power dynamic that I
Hmm.
will refuse to get into with our daughter. And she's older now, so it's like you kind of have to use logic. And because I
Sure.
said, she's just gonna roll her eyes at me and laugh and
Please, Dad.
and
Right.
yeah, you better come up with something better than that. Um, so in all of the parenting things, it's through the lens of a power with dynamic.
Hmm.
And so instead of a power over dynamic, and forgive me, I don't have the social worker's name who came up with this kind of model of thinking, but we base our relationships and our power dynamics as a power with rather than a power over.
Mm.
And so a lot of the examples I use in the parenting section of the family section, parenting specifically, um, once I've learned that model,
Hmm.
I've had to make sure that I'm always using that model when it comes to parenting.
Yeah, that's really good. I think that's the parenting section gave me a lot of things to think about, just the whole family section, because even like you have a piece in there about like arguing with your spouse or significant other, your partner, whatever,
Mm,
like about not treating it like, like you're an MMA fighter, like you're just gonna like go at
yeah,
them because the kids are watching how you deal with those
yeah,
kind of things. And I think even if my wife and I have like a disagreement of some sorts, just to model that well for our daughter, I think is so important because I think it will not only help her in her own interactions, but even as she grows and she has a relationship with people, like she'll be
yeah.
able to have like a better model at home.
Yeah, I think if you have the type of relationship where you can model age appropriate disagreements, I think
Yeah.
that's fantastic. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously, some things need to be behind closed doors,
Sure.
but your daughter's 5, so what you and your wife discuss or disagree with in front of her would be a lot different than, my kid at 11.
Yeah.
And, likewise when they're 16, 17.
Yeah.
As long as it's age appropriate, I think that can be a very healthy because they're gonna have disagreements with people as they
Yeah.
go in their life.
Yeah. That's right. So as I made my way through the book, a question that kind of came to my mind, and I want to know what you think of this. But at what point, and I realize you're a social worker, not a therapist, but
Mhm.
at what point do you think that therapy needs to enter the picture or the
Mm.
conversation when it comes to addressing like your own dickishness, as you call it in the
Yeah.
book? And I ask that because, a lot of stuff you address in the book, I think it can come from or maybe stem from like unresolved issues that people may have, whether
Right.
it be childhood issues,
Yeah.
relational, wounds, baggage, whatever. But I think we try to bury them and then
Hmm.
they get out of control and they grow. And it's been my experience that in my own therapy sessions that although I can make a list of 69, 100, 200 things, whatever, to be less of this kind of a person, if I'm not dealing with that root issue, it's just a band-aid on a much bigger problem. So I was
Right.
wondering as I was reading, like, what are your thoughts on that topic?
That's a good point. I think any time of most of our dickish behavior is a symptom of something.
Yeah.
So I would say that I'm of the belief, and yeah, like you said, I'm a non-clinical social worker, but I'm of the belief that if I had to put a percentage on it, 95% of us should be in therapy. So I think
Yeah.
anyone, and I think the reason we don't, well, for one, probably like I think a lot of toxic masculinity. You know,
Mhm.
people, men especially, will do a lot of shit before they do therapy.
Yep.
Um, and just the stigma that going to therapy has still in our society. I would say anyone who has any trauma from their childhood or otherwise should be in therapy.
Mhm.
I think it can only benefit people. I think that sometimes, like you said, we bury it in such a way that we don't even know what we don't know yet about
Yep.
ourselves,
Yep.
and what our body has held on to
Mhm.
in terms of trauma and maybe abuse or
Mhm.
whatever. So yeah, I would say that anyone who has, you know, if like let's say as a kid, anyone who has been through, you know, a divorce with their parents,
Mhm.
the church, anyone who is LGBTQ has probably suffered trauma.
Yep.
Most racial minorities probably have suffered some sort of trauma.
Yep.
Um, you know, and you know, a lot of men have suffered a lot of trauma and should be in therapy.
Mhm.
Probably have to emphasize with men more often because of how, you know, like I said, how men typically are the ones that shove shit down
Yeah.
and then turn around and probably are more abusive towards other people.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyone. And so once you get to a percentage, you're probably at 95% of us should be in
Yeah.
therapy, and there should be no shame or guilt for going to therapy. It's only gonna, I think it's only gonna make you a better person if you find, you know, the right therapist and someone that you work well with.
Yeah. And I think it's hard too. I think it's hard for people coming out of that evangelical world to go into therapy, because I know for
Mm,
myself, like even thinking, like when I was a pastor, like I remember thinking to myself, I could probably use somebody to talk to, but really being afraid that if anybody knows I'm going to therapy, if anybody knows I'm talking to a counselor, a therapist, whatever, it's almost like there's something wrong with your faith, because
mm,
like if you just pray and you just read your Bible, like Jesus is your therapist, and the
yeah.
Holy Spirit helps you dissect those things. You don't need the help of another person. But if you do, they better be a Christian therapist, because they've got to have the right, biblical mechanics, to kind of help you through
Yeah.
your stuff. And so I think, like, even like when I've thought about in the past, like just in the last few 3 or 4 years, like talking to a therapist, like it's very like those thoughts linger in the back of my mind, just like those accusational voices that if you just would get your act together spiritually, you would be fine. And
Mm,
that's it. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I wish I could just simply say that's not true and that would help people, but it's just simply not. I mean, if it were true, there wouldn't be so much evidence that the church needs more therapy than any entity, or as
Yeah.
much as any entity. It's like,
Right.
okay, if that's true, show me the church that is functioning and doing well, and everyone is addressing their traumas and not displaying toxic behaviors. And
Sure.
you know, it's like, okay, well, now it's obviously evidence that you do need therapy in light of all this prayer and stuff that you're doing. And
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer that if Jesus was sitting in on this conversation, I don't think he would be like, yeah, no, just talk to me and you'll be fine. No, he'd be like, you know, no, go see a therapist. That's what they do. That's what they do. They have education. They're there to help you.
Yeah. I've been watching you, and you definitely need to talk to somebody. That's what he would say.
Yeah, yeah, probably some snarky. Yeah, no, I mean, you definitely need therapy,
That's right.
dude.
So how do you bring this stuff up with someone in your life who is maybe acting in some of these ways? Like let's say, for instance, that let's say there's a woman listening and her husband maybe checks like 90% of the boxes of not being a dick to your family section. So bringing this kind of stuff up with somebody else can be delicate, right? Because even like as I was reading, I'm like,
Yeah,
oh, I know somebody does this, does this, does this. And obviously
yeah.
I have to think of myself too, and like the things that I'm doing. But let's just say that somebody's reading this, or like somebody in their life is checks a lot of these boxes. Like how do you bring this stuff up with people that you love, you even live with, who are acting in some of these ways without completely putting them off and pouring gasoline on the fire?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on your relationship,
Mm-hmm.
and the dynamics of your relationship. Like, I have no idea how you and your wife talk to each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
My wife and I. people watched my wife and I interact, they would probably like think that we have some sort of terrible relationship. Like we flip each other off and we tell each other to fuck off, like as a joke, right? So the
Sure.
dynamic of our relationship is like pretty funny. Like we find each other hilarious. Um, so if she's doing something, I'd just be like, "Hey, did you not read my book?" You know what I mean? Like,
Maybe
uh,
I bookmarked it here for you.
I've like 7 in there for you. Um, so it just depends, and but the ones that are seriously that you have to be delicate on, you just better be delicate on. And I would ask more questions than make accusations. And of course, you can always use the like, instead of "you did this," say like, "Hey, when this happens, like I feel this,"
Yeah.
So it's always good to make "I feel" statements, and that
Yeah.
kind of lessens the accusatory tone, because at the end of the day, like, though we may feel like we just want to get one over on someone, at the end of the day, the goal is to have better communication and to work and live together with people better. So like take the you did this, and
Mhm.
and transform that into, hey, when you don't put the toilet paper back, like I feel annoyed that I have to walk across the house without getting shit on my underwear. You know what I mean? Like,
Right. Waddle like a penguin.
yeah, like it's really awkward to have to go get the toilet paper when you don't remember to put it back. And I feel like my day would go a lot better if I didn't have to do that.
Yeah, right. No, that's good. I think asking more questions is the key, because I think it's very easy to
Yeah,
jump to the accusation of "you did this," as
yeah,
opposed to, even like, help me understand why it is
yeah.
that I always see this happening, or help me understand why
Uh-huh.
it is that you respond in this way, or it confuses me, or whatever. Like, I think when you approach it that way,
Yeah,
anything, whether it be spiritual stuff or it be home stuff, whatever, I think it
right.
just it makes it much easier to talk from there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
So, last question for you is kind of the last section of the book. This is the part that really intrigued me the most about the online stuff. I think it's the maybe most relevant for a lot of people. And one of the hot topics, kind of with the podcast listeners, and a lot of questions I get is, how do you deal with or manage the comment sections on social media pages? So obviously, the section in the book deals with you not being a dick online. But my question for you is, like, how do you deal with the people who are the dicks
Mm,
online? Because I know that you get a lot of stuff on your social media pages, but people who are
yeah,
listening, like, they're not going to have like maybe thousands of viewers and people coming across their stuff that they don't know, but it's primarily family, it's friends, it's maybe
yeah.
ex-church friends, things like that. But like, when someone comes on the page and just goes at it, and they just want to show you all the reasons why you're wrong, all the reasons why you're going to hell, all the reasons why you're backslidden, things like that, what are some things that you've learned in your journey that could help people kind of manage those comment sections well in their own social media pages?
Yeah, again, that one's going to depend on your interpersonal relationships. So
Hmm.
like you said, like, I mean, I hit like 50,000 page views on Pathos. The comment section there can turn into a dumpster fire. So I don't like, my policy is, if it's toxic at all, I just delete it and block the
Hmm.
person. So,
Hmm.
but like you said, someone dealing with their family can't really do that.
Right.
So it's a different dynamic. It's tough. It seems that if you're with a family member or a church member or a former church member, and you still want to have that relationship, and social media is not the place to have that debate.
That's right. That's good.
So if someone's coming at you, and maybe it's a cousin or maybe it's your former Bible study, partner, whatever you do,
Right.
maybe just send them a personal message and be like, "Hey, I saw all your questions. This seems like if we're going to actually get anywhere with that, we should probably talk face to face."
Hmm.
Because communication, 80% of it is body language, I think. 70 to 80% is body language, 10% is tone, or 20% is tone, but the smallest percentage is the actual words you say.
Right.
So on social media, when you're typing something, you're only able to communicate like 10% of what you're actually saying. So,
Yeah.
um, social media can be great for like sharing ideas, as long as everyone's just doing so respectfully.
Hmm.
But I personally don't tolerate anything like that, because the people who generally just come on to disagree, like, I only see them when they disagree. So I just don't. And then you get accused of wanting an echo chamber and this and that. And it's like, no, I don't know all 7,000 of you, and so it seems like this we don't have that relationship to disagree, right? Like
Right.
I think you have to have a level of respect to have a disagreeable conversation.
Yeah.
You know, like going back to how you disagree with your wife, like you have to have a solid relationship to do that in front of your kids so that
Mhm.
so that you are modeling the correct way to disagree.
Yeah.
Having empathy and compassion and respect for the other person as you exchange ideas that you don't see eye to eye on.
Yeah. I think that's key. And I think you have to think about, I had a friend not that long ago that said you have to kind of decide if your page is going to be like a forum for discussion, or if it's going to
Hmm.
be just a place where, people can come and they can agree, be encouraged, whatever. They can say they disagree, but move on from there. Like if it's going to be a
Hmm.
place where there's going to be active debate, there's going to be active conversation, you might have to set some ground rules, like things like that. But I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I think it's a difficult topic, because I mean, I know I've evolved and kind of how I've handled it in the beginning. I would just kind of try to answer every single person that came on, just because
Hmm.
I was in that very beginning phase of deconstructing, asking questions. And I just felt like I had to answer questions to learn how to better explain myself. But now I'm at this point where I can kind of tell right off the bat, like if somebody's just coming on there to argue, and like this
Right.
is just not going to go anywhere if we engage. And so just
Right.
kind of learning how to cut that off and move on, without
Yeah.
having to block or things like that. It's very touchy. It's very difficult.
Yeah. And if someone's just like quoting Bible verses or, I mean, it's just, if they're doing all that kind of stuff, yeah,
Right.
the kind of key phrases that people are going to use if they're, okay, this is not going to go anywhere where I want it to go. So it's just pretty simple. But like you said, I was the same way. Like when
Yeah.
I first started out, I was like, boom, you're getting a paragraph here, and this person, now it's like, I ain't got time for that, man. No,
Nothing. Yeah,
I'm
just
good.
move on. Move
Move
on.
on. That's right.
Especially like you said before, if the person, I know a lot of people who are listening have had this, where the only people that come on and argue, or they never say anything positive on their page. Like I
Yeah.
could post a picture of my kid and they never like it. But as soon
Right.
as I post something about like hell, I'm gonna get a
Right.
paragraph with the Bible verses with KJV in
Yeah.
parentheses, and
Uh-huh.
stuff like that, and they're just gonna get hammered. So I think you
Yep.
just have to learn about what's worth your energy and what's not.
100%. Yep.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, hey, we're just about out of time, but this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. And thanks to the listeners for listening.
Definitely. So before you go though, where can people best interact with you on the socials? Where are you at?
Well, if you go to allsetfree.com,
Mhm.
there's a link to all my socials, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I am on
Twitter.
TikTok as well, but I don't do much on there. I don't really understand the value of it
Neither do I.
yet.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, generally, if yeah, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and I don't know, my handles are at MJ_Distefano, I believe.
Awesome.
There you go.
Cool. Well, I will look it all up and I'll put it all in the show notes.
Well, that'd be wonderful. Thanks, man.
Cool, man.